tend to have the same attachment style with abundance and prosperity as we do with our interpersonal relationships. Like money, it might be an anxious attachment, like it's here sometime, but it's not others. So we have cycles of having a lot of money and kind of having no money. So it can help to just correlate that so you can really holistically upgrade your attachment style to one of more stability.
Good day, listeners. This is CJMiller, your host of the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Wow, what a month June was. We went through our Doodle Book Club, and I am really proud of all of you. I noticed that many of you were doing every day, as I read from my book, you were doodling in your art pads, and I'm really proud. I think there was probably about 100 people that kept up with it every day, and now I see people catching up. So the people that actually committed, and I will let you know, committing to something like a spiritual practice or a spiritual art practice is really key. Committing to doing something every day to ground yourself spiritually. So here we are back with a new interview. I'm excited to kick off July, and I'm really excited with today's guest. Her name is Lisa Tahir, and she has a book called The Chiron Effect. Healing our core wounds through astrology, empathy, and self-forgiveness. She is a licensed social worker, and I think this is going to be such a great book because she uses astrology and psychotherapy to help heal people. So good morning, Lisa. How are you?
Good morning, CJ. I am doing well and so happy to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm thrilled to have you now. Pronounce that for me. Is it
It's
Chiron?
Chiron. So
Chiron.
the CH makes a K. Chiron is Chiron.
Okay, so say that again, the title of your book for our listeners, because I want them to be able to look it up.
Sure, it's the Chiron Effect, healing our core wounds through astrology, empathy, and self-forgiveness.
You know, Lisa, I read through your book, and as I do, I mark up things for
Oh, I
questions and
love that.
all.
Yeah.
Yes, I learned long. I used to be very careful with books. I went to a Catholic school, and I was told that you have to respect the book. And I grew up to realize I write in it and I
I
scribble
do
notes and
too. I do the same exact thing to really digest it and embrace it.
embrace it. Yes, to really. And so I put little sticky notes on, and then I can come back and go, ah.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to point out, which I really love about this is, I have kind of coupled creating art with spirituality. And so I've taken two different methodologies and put them together. It's a little different. And likewise, so have you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think making art is spiritual if one has that paradigm and perspective. I've been a glass artist for 27 years, and that's been a large part of my healing. And glass art, glass blowing, glass casting is definitely therapy for me. And it just absorbs you in the moment. And I think when we're engaged in processes like that, that's when healing can really happen at the subconscious levels because we just are so in the now that things happen in our brain and in our minds and in our bodies to really help us link and sync in ways that might be harder to do in our conscious thinking lives.
I think you're exactly right. I have this last week, I've been battling a stomach bug or something.
Yeah.
And this morning before our call, I had enough energy to paint and to
Wow.
just, that just sitting there and that it's a meditation,
It is.
you know.
It is.
So how did you come about with this? I have so many questions. This Chiron, is that right?
Chiron.
Chiron.
Chiron. Yes. Yes.
You can tell
Unless
I
it's
wasn't into
okay.
Greek. I wasn't a
And
Greek.
unless you are into the Bugatti Chiron, which is a luxury vehicle, I think priced around $1 million, they
Uh-huh.
pronounce Chiron as Chiron. But for this purpose in astrology and Carl Jung's wounded healer archetypes, it's Chiron.
Chiron.
Yeah,
So this Chiron, this aspect of us, is it an aspect of astrology?
it is. Chiron actually in astronomy is a minor planet and comet. It has both designations in astronomy, and it was discovered in the 70s by a Charles Cowell orbiting between the planets of Saturn and Uranus. And it was the first heavenly body in our solar system discovered that had an odd elliptical orbit. And that astronomer named that comet slash planet Chiron after the Greek Centaur, who is known for the healing arts, medicine, botany, pharmacy, therapy. And when we go to the doctor in America and you see the staff of medicine, the two snakes around the staff, Chiron actually gave that to Asclepius, whom he tutored. I thought that was a cool fact.
Wow, you do know your Greek mythology and stories. That's great, you
Thank
know?
you. Yeah.
Um, so are you the first person that's actually used that name in astrology for healing?
Not no, there's other authors that have talked about Chiron in astrology. Barbara Handclough is a an author who is really renowned for her writing about Chiron, just one person that I referenced in my reference section and learned from. I'm the first person to tie it together with psychotherapy and this notion of our patterns in life, the our thought patterns that then dictate the belief systems we have. And that's what informs the actions that we take and don't take in our daily lives. And I see this, CJ, we're a mini solar system, that we are a planet, we orbit other people, places, and things, call it our daily routine, and people, places, and things orbit us. So we're like mini solar systems going around in our lives. And hopefully, your orbit is one that you like. Yet for some of us, there might be anxiety or depression or a sense of feeling like you're not good enough or you're not worthy or valuable enough, especially when there's been childhood trauma that taught you to believe that about yourself. And our orbit and that in those areas are diminished, I think. And that's when we might want to change our orbit as I see it and have more joy, feel more whole, know that we are good enough. And the path to getting there is definitely through working in the area of our thoughts. And in my book, I walk you through some reflective questions, things that happen in your life, both where you felt loved and other times when you didn't, and then the meaning you made about yourself, because that's what we're going to work with is changing the meaning you made about you when certain things happened or didn't happen, and really start to think more loving thoughts and kind thoughts towards and for ourselves, even if that wasn't modeled for you or spoken to you.
Yeah, there's well, you've said so much, and there's so many questions that's trigger. I don't. It's almost like where do I start? I love how you talk about patterns. When I teach my artists on retreats, I address that the pattern of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
As a creative person, recognizing the pattern of who you are, and we are as humans all creative people.
Yes, I agree.
And so I love the fact that you go back and have people kind of look at that pattern of who they are. And one of the things that I really love that you said, and I hope you can expound on this, is we talk about core wounds. And I guess those are wounds that occurred in what age group? The under 10, or what would you call a core
I think the
wound?
age doesn't matter. It's more the memory impression that it made upon you, the memories that still feel like, oh, like that, like it doesn't feel resolved. It's not woven into the tapestry of your life, so to speak. They're pain points. So it could be early childhood, it could be adolescence, it could be something in your adulthood that really wounded your core sense of who you are and what you deserve.
And what I love about it is you address the fact, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that there's a I love the word cyclical pattern. And that if you have a wound in a certain area and you talk about those, that will be kind of that theme
Yes.
will keep returning to you
Right.
throughout your life, right? I mean,
Exactly. And the desire of that happening for us by design is for it to be healed. It's not to bamboozle us or hurt us or trip us up. It's really to give us more chances to heal this part of ourselves, this area in our lives. And you can see these patterns sourced in early psychotherapeutic literature. Sigmund Freud in 1914, I believe, coined the repetition compulsion. And it's the same notion that he saw patterns of relationships repeat, and that can be healthy, positive patterns as well as more damaging and hurtful ones. And I think it's the hurtful ones that get more of our attention. And object relationists, which came after Freud, talked about this as well, that the early template of relationships that were imprinted and impressed upon us become that model that then we start relating to others in our adult lives. And that's friendships and romantic relationships. And so it's really looking at our patterns and what we believe true for ourselves, and like working with the things, not just accepting it's always been this way, so it has to be. No, it doesn't. We can truly take personal responsibility for our healing and shift and change the things, usually gradually, to upgrade them and feel worthy and deserving and start showing up in different ways. I give takeaway steps that you can take to start playing with this in your own life. So it feels gentle and easy and approachable rather than something that's like a major change. I think we tend to resist those major, huge changes. They feel so scary and unfamiliar. So, my book is an invitation to start making some smaller shifts in your behavior, in your thoughts, and in your belief systems.
You know, I love to tell my artists that it's like a tool.
Yeah,
You picked up a tool to survive, and that's the pattern that you pick up.
right.
And so,
Yes.
but we have the choice to look at that tool and go, you know what, maybe I don't need that tool anymore.
Totally, CJ. And often, like you're saying, what was a tool becomes a hindrance at some point in our growth and development. And so that's when it's the perfect time to do this inner work. And you'll know that, you'll feel it. A lot of you listening right now might be in that space where something that used to work isn't. And instead of feeling frustrated with yourself, to have some more curiosity and compassion and empathy, to really look in like what's needed now. And maybe I can let go of this and start, the next step would be, what do I want to embrace instead? What do I want to be true for myself instead? And what do I need to believe? How do I need to show up for that to start becoming more and more a part of my daily life?
Yeah. You know, I want to read something from your book because
Sure.
I think this is, from what I understand in your messaging, it's kind of the first step. Maybe not, but let me just read this to you. And it's about self-forgiveness. Okay. I relied upon the defense mechanisms of intellectualization. All my life, I depended on the power of my intelligence to cope with loss, grief, betrayal, and other similar challenges. However, over and over again, I found that it wasn't enough to understand a situation intellectually to fully heal from it. I discovered that true healing requires invoking forgiveness and compassion as well. And that is from your book. Um,
Yes. Yes. I think that reframing, intellectualization, seeing things from different angles and aspects is a needed part of healing. Yet there's more than just that, because there's some things that happen in life, they might have happened to you. There's just not a good enough answer for it to ever feel or be adequate. Like, oh, I understand why children are sexually abused, for example, or I understand why there's violence in the world. I don't think there's ever going to be a good enough answer where that's going to be okay in anyone's playbook. And so when things like that have happened, it's more about just empathizing to one's experience that this happened. It doesn't make any sense now, but how to just really allow those experiences, even the hardest ones, to what does it want to birth within us? Maybe we'll be able to help people that have gone through that as well, and offer them hope, because hope is such a precursor to being happy and navigating challenges. And just for each of you individually, there's gifts in everything that happens once you take the time to empathize to yourself and forgive you, like forgive yourself first and foremost.
Yeah, I want to repeat that to the listener. You're not just talking about forgiving the perpetrator, you're really talking about forgiving yourself. There's all sorts of guilt associated. Why did I let that happen? Why wasn't I stronger? Why didn't I walk out? Of course,
Right.
none of them, most of them aren't valid.
No, they're not valid. And I think even before you even think of forgiving a perpetrator, like let this be for you solely. Like maybe that forgiving whatever aspect and something a practice I have is to be able to settle into that memory and close your eyes. Often it might be a younger self, a younger version of you, and really like imagine him or her or them just vulnerable and like I'm just so sorry you went through that, and like breathe that in. I'm just so sorry you're still feeling this and this is still hurting you, and I'm just so sorry that so and so didn't show up or didn't protect you. And your own mind will kind of take over with the statements around what you need to just be with that self that you were. And that's where healing starts to take place, is just being with that vulnerability within you and not judging it, because that's informed you to maybe love certain people that aren't as available as you wish they were. And instead of criticizing yourself, it's like, oh my gosh, you really make sense in the context of your own history and life experiences. And to just allow that path and that arc to happen in your life of this unfoldment.
Right. And when we talk about these repetitive patterns, you mentioned, your boss or a relationship, but it's that energy that you bring to it comes into everything. It
It
co- it,
does.
it comes into how you keep a house. It comes into how you make a piece of art, right? It's
Yeah.
the feeling of for me, a great lesson when I was making art is to get to the point to realize that I'm not making this art to get approval,
I like that.
because so many people approach art like, well, if I make that great piece of art, finally I'll be noticed or I'll be loved, and so what I say to my people is, no, love yourself now. It
And
doesn't
yeah, what you're
go.
talking about is being, we hear a lot about unconditional love. And what that really is, when I started to truly understand it, it's say loving regardless of the condition. And the condition is that I want to make this piece of art, create this piece of art for recognition, to finally feel good enough. But when you're able to start, and even baby steps, feeling good about yourself now, regardless of the condition of having the recognition, having the art even finished, for example, just starting to approve of yourself as you are right now, that I'm in the perfect place now. I am on my way to somewhere, everything I want. In fact, if you can believe that, it starts with having some bigger beliefs for yourself and soothing yourself that in this moment, what then am I led to do? And can I make this piece of art from a place of more joy and satisfaction rather than the condition of receiving praise or money or whatever
Right.
it is, like more intrinsic value? Because I think that's when it'll really become more joyful and it'll end up becoming what you want, just in such an easier and more healing way, an
Right. Yeah,
authentic way.
I agree with you. It's you come from that place of joy. It's creating in joy, creating in love. And we talk about the law of attraction. If you create in lack, this is what clicked with me, is if you create with the thought of lack, you will create lackful art,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you're thinking it's broken instead. And so let's talk about your childhood.
Okay.
Because you talk about that there were a lot of these issues, and you talk about, I love this. It's the first time I've heard this, so I'm going to ask you to explain it a little bit too. You talk about attachment styles,
Right.
and you said they're secure, avoidant, and anxious.
Those are the three basic attachment styles. And attachment experts go into more details about that. And a really good book, I think it's in my reference section, is called Attached. And it's two people that wrote it. It's an excellent book on attachment styles. And think about yourself. Do you when we're securely attached, our boundaries can open and close naturally in response to people and experiences. And if you notice somebody's kind of a jerk, you naturally have some healthy distance from them. And kind of how to open and close yourself to engage with them. And you feel good, like you can handle life, you can handle people. It's you really have a secure sense of yourself. If somebody texts you back or not, it's not going to rattle you so much because you know, like, ah, that's about them. It's not about me. That speaks to who they are. I don't need to tell stories of negativity to myself about myself around that. So that's secure attachment. Anxious attachment is where, and I have been working to heal my anxious attachment style, and it comes from a childhood where a caretaker was there sometime but not all the time. So sometime you were attended to but not others, and that was really challenging to sometime have your needs met emotionally and sometimes not, and you were left wondering what's going on when you weren't attended to. Like, maybe I don't deserve it, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not worthy. And that can happen when a parent has an addiction, for instance, and their addiction is a primary relationship. And as children, we don't understand all of that, that it's not us. A parent's just consumed with this addiction that keeps them from being present. And so we make meaning about ourselves that later can lead to an anxious attachment style, that if a person doesn't reply, that we can feel really worried about it. Like, is this connection still there and good? Versus, like, I always have a connection to myself and to source, to, the realm of spirituality, what you believe about that. And I'm going to be okay if this person's here or not, because I am my source of connection. And then the avoidant attached person is more like at an arm's length, that they might be able to go so close and then they're afraid, or the walls come up and they retreat. And sometimes avoidant attachment style people and anxious attachment style people connect because it really plays out both extremes of those attachment styles. So just kind of knowing where you're at can help you, again, understand yourself, being allowing and forgiving and compassionate. Like, this is where I am, but I can absolutely heal if I'm on the anxious or avoidant spectrum and come more to center over time.
So these things. Let me ask you this: those secure, avoidant, and anxious, they are responses to how to trauma or the situation of your childhood or how you grew up. What would you say?
All of it, and who you are as an adult. Like, all of us fall somewhere on that spectrum of the three. And I think often in life we might travel that spectrum, much like the Kinsey scale of sexuality between extreme, heterosexual and homosexual. I think our attachment, there are those of you that came from loving, wonderful childhoods, and you really, more than anything, know, like, I'm worthy and I've got this. But maybe at a certain stage of your employment, you're suddenly fired or let go, and it kind of rattles you for a bit. And you might have a little bit of anxious attachment. Hey, I thought that was going well for me, but you quickly recover because you're more on the secure spectrum. So just see it as like, like, as we grow and develop as humans, our attachment style does as well. And I think we see a correlation. I wrote an article about this once, between our attachment style and money and finances. We tend to have the same attachment style with abundance and prosperity as we do with our interpersonal relationships. Like money, it might be an anxious attachment, like it's here sometime, but it's not others. So we have cycles of having a lot of money and kind of having no money. So it can help to just correlate that, so you can really holistically upgrade your attachment style to one of more stability. We feel more the most peace when we're just more in a stable place with our relationships, ourselves, and our finances.
Well, what does avoid? How do we? I would think I might fall toward avoidant. So how does that develop? What kind of situation would have?
Someone with a truly avoidant attachment style might have had a parent that was really invasive. Like, there were no bound, like totally invasive, and where you just like had no privacy. You just felt constantly invaded upon. And so you erected these really rigid boundaries to let people in. And I doubt that you truly have an avoidant attachment style since you're married, you've raised a son. These individuals have a really hard time with commitment, especially to other people. Like, they feel afraid deep down that they'll be overtaken and overwhelmed, and it's just like, like, too much, like they're going to lose themselves. fully and in a way that's really terrifying. And so it can be a painful place to be because you might desire closeness, but it's hard to actually let yourself get close to people because just that fear comes up of being really overtaken and overwhelmed.
Yeah, I guess what I would think that, we talk about a scale. I would say that I wasn't at the a dysfunctional level of avoidant, but that
Yeah.
if I aired anyway, I would err towards the avoidant. Do you know what I mean? Like if I
Yeah.
slid off and had a bad day, it would be,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that might be what you need to just kind of regain your footing, to regain your stabilities, kind of step out, carve out some time for yourself even
Oh,
to
yeah. See,
process things.
that's right, right on the nose.
Yeah. That's okay. That's okay.
So I think what's important to share with the listeners is to not be. This isn't about shaming yourself or being hard on
No.
yourself. It's just about knowing yourself.
It is
Just
about knowing yourself and seeing. So, this Chiron thing, I was surprised to be led to astrology because usually we talk about what's our sun sign. Like, I'm a Gemini sun. What's your sign, CJ?
Cancer. Mhm,
Cancer. And
mhm.
even when I've had astrological readings with professional astrologers, no one spoke to me about the placement of Chiron in my birth chart. So Chiron is in a sign, like Chiron is in Aries or Taurus or Scorpio, and it's different from your sun sign. And what this reveals and what my book highlights for you is the area that we have sourced these patterns, typically of lack or feeling afraid, minimizing, feeling like we kind of protect ourselves. We don't want to talk about that. We create compensation methods to and resourcefulness to kind of protect this area of ourselves because we don't feel so good there. And it could show up, say if your Chiron is in the sign of Aries, it speaks to this really people pleasing way of sourcing love that you appear to love, and you do on one hand doing things for others. You're very activated and proactive and really successful. Like achievement comes easily to you, and you love identifying a goal and then taking the steps to achieve it. But the part that hurts you and is wounding for you is that you don't take the time to allow, like, how that feeling of success is, like to feel like you're successful, and you just keep achieving, but you never feel good about yourself. And at some point you're in some severe depletion, and that's when even health problems could come up from stress and anxiety, doing too much. And it's about learning, if you never did another thing, you're good enough now. And how can you approach doing and achieving from a more authentic place of this makes me happy, but it's not what I need or have to do to be valuable in the world. It's really shifting that and allowing yourself more play and fun and freedom, and knowing that that's just as important and valuable as the achievement.
Yeah. Wow. You got me there. Uh,
Yeah.
when you say, and I will tell our listeners in the back of the book, you have the different areas of the horoscope. Is that your birth sign? Like, so if you say
No, no,
Chiron,
that's what I mean. Chiron's totally different. That's why I have an interactive website when you get my book. And I encourage you to read it from the first page to the last page because you're going to miss things. There's a part where I have an interactive website, nolatherapy.com/Chiron. And there's a spot where you enter your date of birth, your place of birth, and if you have it, your time of birth. And boom, it tells you my Chiron is in like Aries, Libra, Aquarius, Pisces, and it's different.
oh, okay.
It's
So it
different
depends
than
on
your
when
sun sign.
is it
Yeah.
the time of your birth too?
The time of birth reveals the house placement. So that's not as important. The house placement is where this Chiron vulnerability manifests. Is it in the workplace? Is it in your marriage or intimate relationships? Is it in your family of origin or in the home you're currently in? But once you read your Chiron in the sign, you're going to know where this manifests. So if you don't have your time of birth, it's okay. You just need to know the sign it's in, and that's going to help you know this is the one area whenever your mood takes a dip. Okay, there's something going on here in this aspect, so you can really refine the way you support and love yourself, it makes it easier to know what's happening. Again, understanding yourself and being able to give yourself what's needed. And in your relationships, if you're in a relationship or marriage, it can help to know each other's Chiron placement, because those are the areas that arguments might center around or dissatisfaction might center around. And it'll help you be supportive of your partner instead of judgmental and critical. It'll add that layer of empathy as like a nice cushion in your relationship.
Hmm. Yeah. So when did this interest, did you always have an interest in astrology? Is that something when you were very young or?
No, not at all. I became a therapist. I started therapy when I was 21, and I learned at 21, this is what I want to do with my life, is help people. Like my therapist was helping me to understand myself, understand my patterns and how to change, how to grow. And so I started social work school at Tulane University in New Orleans in my early 20s. And I've been a therapist now for over 25 years.
Wow.
And it was about 8 years ago, I was still curious and frustrated that why do I have so many successful clients that are still battling and struggling with anxiety or depression or feeling like they're not good enough? And why was I still engaged in those mental gymnastics that were just exhausting me? And when I turned to meditation, that's when I just started hearing Chiron. And I wasn't very impressed. I expected something different from the universe. But as I've learned, like some of you might know, when something comes up repeatedly, it's an invitation to let's just go explore this. I started Googling it and learning about the Chiron in astronomy, Chiron in Greek mythology, and then finally Chiron in astrology is this area of vulnerability and wounding on a spectrum, again, that some of you, this is just a vulnerability. Like you feel good about yourself most of the time. On occasion, it's like an ouch. And for others of us that experience some more trauma or wounding, it is more of a core wounding where our whole self concept is affected by this experience of where Chiron is in your birth chart and what that means. Chiron in Cancer, for example, the sign of Cancer speaks to abandonment. And you might have been abandoned by a parent, literally, who left, or abandoned by their addiction or their affair. For instance, Chiron in the sign of Taurus speaks to core wounding by neglect, that you experience some sort of neglect in your life or sexual abuse, or you might be neglecting yourself in some important way. Chiron in the sign of Virgo speaks to a wounding in your physical health and in your health routines, that you might be having health problems that need to be addressed. So it's really so interesting and revealing to know this one area. And if you're thinking it, I'm going to answer it before you even put it out there. Okay. I used to think astrology was like telling me what to do or telling me this is my life. And I always had a struggle about that because I really believe in our free will and our autonomy. And I had this download, CJ, in the last few years. We wrote our own birth chart. Like, this is what you wrote for yourself. And so you have authorship and autonomy to shift and change any or all of it based on the information about these are some things I wanted to come into my physical life to live. And maybe I don't want to live that anymore. Maybe I want to have an easier time, for example. And so what do you think about that
Well, I thought that
notion?
was very perceptive.
Okay, yeah. What do you think about that? Yeah.
I was going to say that's very perceptive of you because my next question was going to be, so, psychology and therapy is a very serious, you've got these very serious people, and then you have astrology, which is way over here. And so how do you answer that when someone says, "Oh, I don't go for all that." A lot of people will go, that stuff going up in the stars and stuff has nothing to do with me. And I have an answer for it, but I was just wondering, like, what you kind of just did,
Well, I
say.
also think astrology is such a complex symbolic language. There is so much to it. It has been used for thousands of years for people to plant crops and know about cycles and again patterns in life. Why wouldn't it also inform you about yourself and some personality aspects, some things that might make your life more easy and and like delightful to know about these patterns that again you chose, you wrote. It's not something arbitrary dictating to you. It's what you wrote. Most likely, I don't remember before I came into my physical body what I wanted to live, but my life is evidence of what I wanted to live, and so is yours. So why
Right.
not use that symbolic language to help yourself have like an easier and better time and really fulfill those your destiny that you want through your free will. I just think it's such an interesting and beautiful kind of template to consider in your own life.
I definitely agree. And what I would add to that is the more I do my spiritual journey, the more I realize this sounds really strange, but everything is the same. So
Mm,
the messages are in everything.
yes,
You talk about a pattern. There is a pattern of spirit in everything.
there is. Absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
And so if I sit down and I focus on art making, even though someone will say, well, art is silly, it's a waste of time, there are things that are connected to my psyche and how I think about my life and who I am and how I just define myself in relationship.
Right.
And likewise, astrology, there's you take the story lines and the messages, it's going to help you. You
It
know,
will. And
there's a
even looking,
pattern in there.
there is. And even the moon affects our tides and so much on our planet. Why wouldn't it also affect us? We're mostly water, just as an example. So the planets do have, they exert a force upon us, and they're, I just think it's such a beautiful and very complex language. Astrology is so complex. I took a class here in Los Angeles and it was just overwhelming. I need another lifetime to learn all of what it offers us. And so if you're doubtful, I don't expect to change your mind, but I would hope you would consider that maybe there's something for you to learn about yourself through what I share about Chiron, particularly as a diagnostic point to understand maybe the areas of your life that don't work quite as well as you wish they did, and then what you can personally do about it for yourself.
Right. And I think what a lot of people don't realize with astrology is this is an ancient art.
Yeah,
And there's societies that did follow astrology heart and soul, like you might. And so it's not something that just spur of the moment that came up. This has long history, a long
right.
history of investigation and understanding. And like I said, there's that truth in everything. Um,
Mhm.
I have people will say something like, I don't think you should close yourself off to anything, really.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
But I have people they'll close themselves off to religion or old traditional religion, and I would say to them, well, they that was developed for thousands of years. So when you talk about meditation or silence or forgiveness,
Yeah.
the substance behind it is still valuable.
I love
You
what
know,
you're saying. It's so true. And it can bring us more peace and it can bring us more clarity that you might not want to practice the religion of your childhood,
right?
but are there aspects that you really loved and that you don't have to throw out the whole baby, for example? Maybe having certain moral values or volunteering, giving back. Like, what aspects do you really appreciate? And how might you expand that by exploring some other traditions and belief systems?
I definitely think so. And I try to, the older I get, the more I'm learning to step back from words and definitions and
Yeah, I
get
like
get
that.
to get to what I call the spiritual essence of it.
I
The,
love
s-
that.
the spiritual truth of this is self-awareness, being in touch with yourself, seeing how your patterns are repeating in your life and how they're affecting you and understanding that you can alter them, that you are
Yes,
at choice.
absolutely.
We are at choice.
Yeah, it's the best thing to realize that. And that might take some time and practice because whatever situations in your life that are occurring that are undesirable, they've taken a while probably to get in that condition. So to really have some patience with yourself and allow the change to happen, you might need to learn some new things you didn't know before about your psychology or your needs, or you might need to prioritize yourself more and others less, or the opposite of that. You might need to prioritize others more and yourself less. And just to really be curious about that.
Yeah, I love that aspect of it, the curiosity, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is awesome, CJ.
It is. So you obviously have been a lifelong learner, it sounds like,
Yeah.
in exploring spirituality and growth and all these for years.
Yeah, I've always been a seeker. I've always been so curious about people and why we are who we are and wanting to help others really be their best happiest version of themselves, really in self-awareness and feeling their own value and worth, because I think when we're in that place, we don't hurt others or the planet as much. When we're happy, we just naturally do better and good things, and life, that really, that vibration really affects things in a positive sense. So I want that for others and myself.
See, and you're in a totally different doing a totally different thing than I'm doing. And what you just said is exactly the spiritual essence of
Yeah.
what I want to do, which is I want people to be more self-aware of who they are so that they are more respectful of each other, of themselves, of the
Yes.
planet.
Absolutely.
It's a win-win.
It is a win-win. Absolutely, CJ.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. It's like I start seeing these patterns in all these different methodologies and techniques and how it all works. And that's why when I was reading a book, I'm like, oh yes, I talk about this in my book. I talk about, patterns, and I talk about wounds and trauma. I would tell you, it's so funny. I started doing these spiritual retreats, and I realized early on, because I do a meditation opening up, how much people come in to the retreat with trauma,
I
es-
believe it.
especially trauma with their creativity.
Oh, wow.
You,
Yeah.
where they were traumatized either away from it or to it. They could be pushed to it. But so trauma is a big message that you have in this book. It's obviously something you feel very strongly about. So, how do you approach that? Is it possible? I want to ask you, do you think you can totally remove the residual effects of trauma?
I do think, and I see it as one of my early mentors taught me this. So I'll reference Deborah Volker. And it's such a beautiful metaphor that trauma or the static in our lives, it's like the volume, the knob of a stereo, and it might be really high right now for you, but over time as you heal, you turn that volume down. And there are absolutely times where it's off. Like it's not, you're not feeling it, you're not thinking it. And there might be triggers that happen. It's like, ooh, that kind of spikes up for a moment. But what you learn is that I can handle this. I have methods and practices and enough sense of myself to know this isn't the dominant sound in my life anymore, that it's turned off. And there could be moments, because again, we're such complex beings and we're encountering others, and of course you might feel it from time to time, but it's not driving your life. It's not the driving force in your life anymore, and that just can feel so good. Absolutely
Yeah.
good.
So funny when you told me that metaphor, I pictured, you said sometimes we can be triggered, and I pictured a car pulling up next to you with their radio really loud,
Oh
and suddenly
yeah,
their trauma triggers you all, like
totally.
if you let it. Yeah,
But
yeah.
you'll have practices, as you know, over time to handle that, and to whatever you need to do to release that, what it brought up in you, or to have the conversation with someone or the conversation with yourself.
Wonderful. So I will definitely go and go online. That's probably my avoidant. I read your book, but I didn't go online and fill out the thing to see where I'm landing. So I will do that when we get off the call.
Well, and I'm sure for you, CJ, because a lot of us that are doing this healing work and working with others, that you have been healing your Chiron placement naturally. And so I'm sure you're actually going to feel excited. It's like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this and not even knowing I'm doing it. Because again, life wants us to be led to healing and happiness and abundance. And I am certain that you have been healing. And again, not everybody has this deep wound. For some people, it's just like a little ouch, but that your life mission is often centered around your Chiron placement, because it's naturally where we have so much experience and information in and about. We can't help but give and want to share that and help others.
I love that. That's very true. Your life situation or what you're doing for a living is often tied into what that whole basis of who you are, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Huh. Well, is there anything else about your book that you'd like to share with our listeners? I mean, is this available on Amazon? Where would they get it?
It is, CJ. It's on Amazon. It's even at Walmart.com, which I
Oh
was
wait.
surprised to see. I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. And you can just, yeah, Google my name, Lisa Tahir, or the book, and it'll come up. And I feel like this was such a beautiful conversation about your healing work and mine and the synergies. And I would love to have you on my podcast, All Things Therapy, later this year, CJ,
That would be
to talk
wonderful. I
more
love
about how
it.
you work with people and their creativity. It's
Because
so important.
it's all the same. I mean,
Yeah,
it's so funny. It's different, but it's
right.
this, the same touch points
The same
and
energy and like core aspect.
yeah. I love one thing you said earlier too, especially about that you just kept hearing
Yeah.
that shows me that you really are tied in and grounded because you kept hearing the word in your head and you until
Yeah.
finally you acted upon it.
Yes. And that happens for all of you listening or watching. That happens. Life is wanting us to lead us to everything we want, to just kind of put your ear to the ground more. And that's why I think some silence and meditation is important, so that we can be in a peaceful enough emotional state to receive those downloads, those curiosities, the inspiration and intuition, to then
Right.
go seek that out.
Just listeners, just listening to this podcast is life leading you.
It is. It
Spirit
is.
is always talking to you, and are you listening? So
Yeah, I
I
love
love
that.
it. Well, thank you for being on the show. This has been a joy. Like I said, it's really it's fascinating, right? It's just
Thank you,
fascinating
CJ.
the parallels and I look forward. I would love to be on your show, and
Yeah,
I
we're
look.
going to schedule that. I'm excited to have you on and
All
continue the
right.
conversation and make it specifically about how you work with people.
Well, great. Thank you.
You're
So,
welcome.
listeners, thanks for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. And you can read and find all this information in the description so you can chase down Lisa and talk to her more.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you and doing the doodle poll last month. It was a great experience. And I look forward to you later in July following the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Thanks again. Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.